everyone for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. We're here for our annual meeting. The warning reads, the legal voters of the Northern Mountain Valley Unified Union School District, consisting of the towns of Bakersfield, Berkshire, Montgomery, and Sheldon, are hereby warned and notified to meet at the Sheldon Elementary School in Sheldon, Vermont, on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023 at 7 p.m. to transact the following business. Articles 3 through 6 will be voted on by Australian ballot in the respective polling places and times, hereinafter named on Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily for Article 1.
So Article 1 is to elect a moderator. Do we have any nominations?
Nominate Mary Niles.
Do we have a second?
Oh, I'll second.
And you are, sorry,
Erin Pocket.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I will give, do you, Morgan, do you, Mary, solemnly swear that you will faithfully execute the office of moderator for the state of Vermont and will therein do equal right and justice to all persons to the best of your judgment and ability according to law? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Right, so
So he becomes,
I'm.
You're
so
the
then-
moderator,
So in
yeah.
the next order of business is Article 2, which is to elect a clerk.
Correct. So we ask for nominations.
Any nominations?
I nominate Emily Fecto.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of Emily Fecto as our elected clerk?
Aye.
Great. Okay. So, moving on to Article 3. And these I'm just reading, correct, Marvin? To elect one school director for a 3-year term ending March 2026, who resides in the town of Bakersfield. To elect one school director for a 3-year term ending in March 2026, who resides in the town of Berkshire. To elect one school director for a 3-year term ending March 2026, who resides in the town of Sheldon. Moving on to Article 4. Shall the voters of the district approve the school board to expend $19,481,245, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. And so with that article, I'm going to turn things over to Morgan to go through the annual budget.
Mary, I think we may have lost sound online.
Okay.
Screen share.
Kat, are
Okay.
you able to hear them?
No, it's because.
I can hear you, but I can't hear them all.
What was the last part that you heard, Len?
You were just beginning to talk about Article 4.
Gets the screen
There's a
share.
problem with the screen share.
Oh, okay, I'll repeat it for those joining virtually.
Can you hear us now, Lynn?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Morgan, should I repeat Article 4?
sure.
Okay, so Article 4, shall the voters of the district approve the school board to expend $19,481,245, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year.
And so I'll start by talking a little bit about the budget process that the board went through. The conversations start in September and October, and the board had previously identified 3 main goals The first one being all students reading on grade level by third grade. The second is that all high school graduates demonstrate proficiency through a personalized learning plan. And the third is that all students will demonstrate proficiency in social emotional learning priority standards. An additional plan consideration for this board was a continued examination of the inequities between the 4 NMV schools since the merged district. Okay, you can go to the next one, Courtney. We've got a slide on enrollment, just something that we certainly talk about at the board level. You can see from 2018 to 2022, we've got real data, and then we're projecting out from 2023 on. For the most part, Berkshire, Bakersfield, and Montgomery are on a fairly steady trend projected for enrollment. Sheldon, we're seeing some pretty steep inclines that we're bracing for. The numbers may be skewed a little bit by COVID. You can see a drop for all the schools in 2020, and that does tend to play with the projections. But I think for folks who are living in Sheldon, the idea that we're going to see more students in this school is kind of common sense. Next one. Some additional considerations that the board was weighing as they developed the budget. We've definitely seen an increase in all our schools in a percentage of students with social emotional needs. This is maybe not surprising as we're coming out of COVID. Act 127 is changing the formula for determining tax rates. I can talk ad nauseum on it for anyone who's interested, but basically the legislature has determined that the way we are weighting students and different student needs has been inaccurate over the last 20 years. As those corrections are put into place, we are likely to see a higher pupil count, which will either lower taxes for the same amount of spending or allow the district to spend more for the same tax rate. The COVID money that we've received is expiring over the next 2 years, ESSER 2 in FY24, so the year that we're voting on now, and ARP ESSER, which is the larger of the two, will be expiring in FY25. We've talked about in the past the change to the special ed funding formula. The state is moving away from a reimbursement model to a block grant model and giving boards and schools a lot more flexibility in how to spend that money. We are anticipating over the next 3 years that we will see more money under the block grant model than we have in the past. Potential PCB remediation. 2 of the 4 NMV schools are going to be examined for PCBs. There's been a lot of press in Burlington, a little bit of press in Cabot around PCB presence and the remediation steps that people are going to need to take. The state is woefully behind in their examination. We thought going into this budget year we might be preparing to spend money for remediation. I think that's likely pushed out a year now. The Universal Meals Bill, we are in the first year of that. That is a bill that allows all students to have breakfast and lunch for free at all schools. We had already been doing that in all the NMV schools. It has meant increased revenue for us. That bill expires at the end of the year. My anticipation is that the legislature will want to continue that, but they have not identified a funding stream, and if that funding stream is the ed fund, it's likely that that will drive up tax rates in the long run. Finally, we needed to rebid our transportation contract this year. Obviously, busing companies are seeing the same pressures on fuel costs and staffing costs that schools are and businesses are. That contract went up, I think, around 17%, and we had only one bidder on it, and we were frankly lucky to have one bidder. Some of the other considerations in this budget: health insurance premium increases went up 12.5%. That's staggering in that it's kind of the new normal, and we've seen that over the last 5 years. Dental increase has gone up 2%. That's higher than it has been in the past. And then the multi-line insurance premium, which is insurance for everything else, liability and buildings, is up 7%. That's, I think, largely driven by cybersecurity and the cost of that insurance being added to us. NMV is also bracing for an increase in high school students. You pay tuition for everybody 9th through 12th grade going to high school. We have 85 8th graders when we warned this budget, and only 48 graduating seniors, so that's a driver for the budget. And then additional classrooms at Sheldon Elementary. We'll talk a little bit later in terms of staffing, but as part of that examination of inequities, we have identified that the middle school in Sheldon is understaffed. So we're proposing adding 2 staff members and also trying to find space for those additional classrooms. We've got a bid out for some mobile classrooms, which the board will be considering in March as a temporary solution. For folks who know Sheldon, they can see that a chunk of the library is gone. We had cut that off to make a 3rd grade classroom, and I've also already added a pre-K classroom this year to try to alleviate that. Again, harkening back to the enrollment projections, we hope that this will buy us a few years, but there may be larger discussions down the road in terms of what we're doing in Sheldon if those growth trends continue. Staffing changes, there's more than what's on this slide, but these are kind of the big changes. At Bakersfield Elementary, we're bringing the night custodian to full-time, and we have a middle school teacher position that's been open for a couple of years, and we're not planning on filling that. In Berkshire, the pre-K teacher has been split between regular ed and special ed, proposing moving that all to full-time regular education, and special ed would be served by the itinerant staff of the supervisory union. No major changes in Montgomery, and then in Sheldon, as I mentioned, adding 2 middle school teachers, the 3rd grade teacher, which I mentioned. We've also put in the budget a dean of students, commonly known as assistant principal, and then we are not filling an open interventionist position and an open administrative assistant position. And those last 3 were around some changes that the board discussed and made for this year. The budget is just catching up to that. And then district-wide, this budget is proposing a health teacher and a tech integrationist who would be shared across all 4 schools. Again, Mary had read the article. This is how it will read on your annual meeting warning. And you can go to the next slide. In the packet, which is available here and is in your town book, there are a few charts, and I'll just walk through them quickly. This first pie chart looks at that $19 million budget and kind of breaks it up in terms of what we buy and how we spend our money. So this blue half is the cost of all your people. That will include your teachers, paraeducators, custodians, principals, school level support staff. So that's half the pie chart. That's pretty normal for a district that does not operate its own high school. This big light pink section here is the tuition bills that you pay. Those are primarily for high school students. There may be some pre-K kiddos where the parents are getting a voucher that you're paying for, or there may be some situations where there's a student with needs in the K through 8 grades that we can't meet in our schools, and we're paying tuition to another school for that. Next biggest chunk is other services, and these are primarily services that come from the supervisory union, and they are transportation, food service, and then your special education teachers. Those three categories make the biggest chunk of that. For the next one. Same budget broken up by what we do. So now this green section is direct instruction. Again, this piece of pie on the bottom is those tuition payments to primarily the high schools. Over here are your staffing and costs for instruction of your pre-K-8 students. The blue section is support. This would be, student support would be your nurses and guidance counselors. Instructional support would be librarians, technology, teacher training, school administration, and again, a good sized chunk for central services, which is that food service, transportation, and special ed teachers. This little red wedge up on the top and for other is the debt service on the buildings that we're still paying off capital projects. This chart is also in your town books. I'll walk you through it quickly and happy to stay after and answer questions. The formula for coming up to a tax rate starts with your budgeted expenses, which is the one line that you, the voters, have control over. From that, we back out grant revenue, which is primarily the small schools grant, which we are still getting for 2 of our schools, and then use of fund balance, which is money that was left over in FY22, and we'll talk about that later. That gets you to an education spending figure, and that is divided by the equalized pupil count. You picked up a few equalized pupils, and again, this is that 2-year average of students weighted by different factors, poverty, English language learners, special education, and then different grade bands. This is that figure that's going to be changing next year, and I think changing pretty significantly to your benefit. Dividing that out, you get an education spending per pupil. So for this district, the proposed education spending per pupil is $17,782, an increase over last year. I will say we've done an informal survey around business managers across the state. About 80 have chimed in, and 80 out of say 110. I think more than half are up over 20,000 now for the proposed budget. So as you'll see later, we tend to be at the bottom in terms of per pupil spending, and I suspect if all budgets around the state are approved, we will still be in the basement. That ed spending per pupil figure is divided by the dollar yield amount, which is a figure that is proposed by the tax commissioner in November and will be set by the legislature in May. This uses the figure proposed by the tax commissioner. We haven't heard of a better number to use yet, and so that's what most districts are using across the state. That gets you to the equalized residential school tax rate, which is a tax rate for the district as a whole. On this budget, it's $1.14, so a drop of almost 8 cents over the budget proposed last year. That's largely a function of you're doing better in terms of equalized pupils, and the yield is stronger, and that's offsetting the increase to your ed spending figure. And then this shows the NMV tax rate since FY20, which is the first year we really budgeted as a unified unit. So you can see it was pretty steady for the first 2 years. It's dropped off in FY23 and 24. And again, I think the major drivers are that the yield has been strong those 2 years, and unlike a lot of the state, you've seen relatively stable, if not increasing, equalized pupil counts. That district school tax rate is divided by the CLA to get the local tax rate. So every town in NMV starts with that $1.14 figure, and based on where their CLA is, they come up with the tax rate that's actually on your tax bill. We have seen in all of our towns the CLA is dropping pretty significantly. That's because think everybody knows that property values are rising, and so the CLA is an attempt by the state to make sure that every grand list in the state is at a relatively equal amount. These are dropping across the state, because everybody in every town is seeing these increases. For Bakersfield, the CLA dropped 7%, and so when you apply that to that district tax rate, their tax rate that they will see on their residential bills will actually be up 2.5 cents. Berkshire dropping more dramatically, tax rate would be up 4.5 cents on the next two. Montgomery also 4.5 cents, and then Sheldon, which is seeing the biggest decline in the CLA because the biggest pressure on property sales would come in at a little over 7.5 cents. So again, the district rate, the rate that's kind of controlled before the CLA is down, but because those property values are increasing everywhere, the rate that your voters will actually see on their residential rate is going up. The non-residential rate is not controlled by any budget votes. I would anticipate, because of those CLA figures, that most of our towns will see non-residential rates increase as well. And then this chart again, the black line shows you the district tax rate, and then each of the colored lines will show you the tax rate after the CLA. So you can see the rate was pretty flat for the district for the first 2 years of existence. Most of the town tax rates were increasing a little sharper as those CLAs fell. It dropped significantly in FY22, but the CLA pressure wasn't as bad. And then with the property sales we're seeing now impacting the CLA, those are increasing dramatically. At some point, all of the towns in NMV are gonna be forced to do a reappraisal. At that point, there will be a huge swing in the CLA. In theory, it would go up to 100% if the appraisal is completely accurate. From what I've seen, sometimes it'll go up to 110%, or sometimes it'll only go up to 95%. But at that point, you're gonna, you'll see a benefit in terms of the tax rate as the CLA pushes it down. You'll probably see flatter increase on your taxes, because when that assessment goes through, everyone's property assessment will go up, nearly everyone. Okay. This chart is also in your town books. This is for last year, the education spending per pupil. So there was a low of about 12,300, a high of just shy of 27,000. The Franklin County average is this blue line here, about 20% up. Statewide average about 40–45% up. Northern Mountain Valley is coming in here about 15th from the bottom. And again, this is last year's numbers. From what I'm seeing of this year's numbers, if budgets pass, we will end up in that same place. Okay, I'll let Madam Moderator read the next article. I mean, we can pause there for questions on the budget article if there are any. All right, so you can read.
Okay, thanks, Morgan. So Article 5, shall the voters authorize the Board of School Directors to deposit $243,824, half of the surplus funds from the 2021-2022 school year, into the capital reserve funds?
So I'll talk briefly about this. This is similar to the article that the board asked for last year. There you go. At the end of FY22, we had just under $500,000 left over. So we start the year with projections on what we're gonna need from the state in terms of tax money, what sort of grant money is gonna come in, and how much we're gonna spend. In a perfect year, you spend down to zero. We try to tell our principals that they're spending too much and try to end the year with some money in the bank. That money goes back to the voters for the FY '24 budget. What the board is proposing is for the voters to put half of that in a capital reserve fund, which will be used for future renovation projects, repair projects in our schools. We've used some of that in the past for paving, for boiler work, projects that are big, but that you don't really want to put in your general fund budget because they tend to skew the tax rate from year to year. Last year in FY '23, we had probably about $1.2 million left over from FY '21, so that number was significantly higher. The board at that time asked for half, and the voters approved that. They decided again to ask for half. Part of that decline is the reason that that the revenue declined on that tax rate page that I showed you. This will not impact the budget amount. This will impact how much money goes back to buy down the tax rates if it's passed or if it fails.
Thanks. And Article 6, shall the voters of the district authorize the Board of Directors to borrow money not in excess of anticipated revenue for the school year pursuant to Title 16 VSA 5629?
And this is an article we ask for every year. It gives the board authority to borrow money in July, August, September to pay teachers and pay bills before the state starts to send tax money in and the towns start to send tax money in, which tends to be in the fall.
And then I'll go through these polling places and times. So for Bakersfield residents, voting is at the Bakersfield Town Hall. Polls will open at 10 a.m. and close at 7. For Berkshire residents, voting will take place at the Berkshire Town Office. Polls open at 10 and close at 7. For Montgomery residents, voting will take place at the Montgomery Grange Hall. Polls will open at 10 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. And for Sheldon residents, voting will take place at the Sheldon Elementary School. Polls will open at 7 and close at 7 p.m.
And that's all I have for the budget presentation. I think I and the board and the administration here are happy to answer any questions that have come up. There are none in the Q&A. From the floor.
I'm all good.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you everyone, I appreciate you coming out. Be safe with the impending storm, and thanks for all that you do. Appreciate it.